Welcome back, everybody. This week is going to be a little bit different. It's not a workflow or a post-processing lesson. It's going to be just a quick technique, a quick hitter, I might say, to convert your landscape taken shots into a vertical format for Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, social media. Yes, you do need to do this. I know I fought it forever too. I still take my photos in landscape because on the forefront of my mind is how does a photo demand to be taken? How does a scene demand to be shot, right? And it's usually going to be a landscape orientation for us landscape photographers. However, if you want to be seen amidst a sea of talent and a lot of beautiful images, you need to take up as much of that screen as you can. You can still shoot out in the field with prints in mind and with landscape in mind. That's what I do. I'm going to take you into it. It's going to only take about 2 minutes. Let's do it. So let's begin as we usually do here in Lightroom, and I like to go over the location and EXIF data first. This was shot at Mount Baker in Washington, and you can see the shutter speed 1/250th, f4, ISO 100. Not really relevant to this particular discussion, but I know a lot of people like to see it. So let's talk about the actual image. I shot this in landscape orientation because it needed to be shot in landscape orientation. This is how the scene looks naturally, and it was the correct orientation. If I'd gone vertical, I would have had a lot of extra sky and extra ground that I don't need. This gives me more range of mountain, and I prefer that. But I'm going to show you the way to transform it for a vertical format in Instagram using Photoshop because unfortunately Instagram requires that. And I want to first mention two things. I have another version of this photo that I shot zoomed in, and there's that. Now I actually kind of prefer this version. However, I can't use this version, not very well anyway, for what I'm about to show you because there isn't enough sky and ground to work with. When you're going to be doing a transform, the more kind of extra space you have, the better. So if you have two versions of a photo, choose the one that has a little extra sky to work with, a little extra ground to work with, or you should be shooting your photos in the first place with a little bit of extra on each because a lot of the times it needs to get cut off for frames, for canvases, stuff like that. So I always recommend leaving a bit of extra space anyway. From Lightroom, we just go File, we just go right click, edit in Adobe Photoshop, and away we go. The first thing we almost always want to do is Command J, and what that does is duplicates the background layer. Now the thing is, there's certain things you can't do to a background layer, and one of those things is transforming it. So we cannot work off the background layer. We absolutely have to start with Command J and duplicating the layer. If you're zoomed way out or way in, you'll need to hold Command and press the plus or the minus to zoom in and out. But that should be fine for where I'm at. The first thing I'm going to want to do is Command T. That's Command T as in transform, and you can see we have these pins. Now you can transform by literally just clicking and dragging these to stretch it up or down or left or right. But what I'm going to do, I usually like to start by using a height ratio. So if this is on, the maintain aspect ratio, you want to turn it off because we are going to go from a wide format to a vertical format, and we can't have the aspect ratio locked if we're going to do that. So make sure this is clicked off like it is right now. Come into height. I usually start with something that I know is going to be way too high, like 150, just to see what I think I can get away with. And indeed, that is too high. That peak looks unnatural. I'm going to go about half of that is my guess. So let's go 125. And that looks good to me. I don't think I could notice that it had been stretched at all. So I'm going to hit the checkbox. Now you'll notice that there is space on the top and bottom that's no longer included. We're going to need to get that in there. So the next thing we do is come down to this crop tool. I'm not sure why it defaulted to it, but that was helpful. If you come down and click the crop tool, you'll see that defaults to the ratio that I shot it at, 3:2. And yours might not have 3:2. Yours could have anything in there, could have nothing in there. But no matter what it has, you're going to want to go in and type 4:5. That's the correct ratio for Instagram, Facebook, etc. So there's a couple ways you can do this, and I often use different ones, but I'm going to show you what I think is the most effective. If I think I'm going to want to stretch equally top and bottom, then what I'm going to do is hold the Alt-Option key. It's Alt-Option on a Mac, and I believe it's the Alt key on a PC. But while you're holding it, you'll click and drag from the bottom, and you can see that the top and bottom are expanding at the same height. So we could do it that way. The other way you can do it is by just kind of clicking from one direction. If, for example, you thought we have a lot more ground to work with than sky, then you can just start by going more on the ground and a disproportionate ratio at the top. That might sound a little bit confusing, but essentially what we're saying is based on the image that I'm looking at, do I think I'll get away with stretching from the bottom or the top more or both equally? In this case, I think I'll be fine doing it equally. So what I'm going to do is hold that Alt-Option key and I'm just going to come down until my bumpers have hit the side. Now the other question I have to ask, I'm now going to hit Command minus a couple times to zoom out. That's a lot of space I need to fill in the top and bottom. So my first question is, do I need everything on my sides, or can I afford to crop this down a little bit? And in this case, I can definitely come in a little bit. So I'm going to try holding Alt or Option again to come back down. And I think about there, I can afford to lose that space on my sides without any problems, without it ruining the image or anything like that. So hit the checkbox when you have the ratio that you want. And obviously now what we need to do is fill the white space top and bottom. But this technique allows us to see how much space we have to fill. Now, the reason I mentioned wanting to use one with a lot of extra sky is because it's a lot easier to stretch a sky. It doesn't have details like a mountain peak that are going to look all stretched out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to the rectangular marquee tool, and I'm going to just click and drag, start at the top of the sky, and going to just before we touch that mountain peak. Right there is good. And I'm going to hit Command J. That's going to duplicate the layer based on our selection. So if I turn off the eyeballs on these, you can see that I've only got a new layer of the bit that was selected there. And why that's going to work, if I now hit Command T and I pull up and fill that extra space, because there wasn't really any clouds or anything to stretch, it was just shades of blue and a gradient, it's going to look fine. If I go ahead and hit the checkbox here and apply that transformation, and I come back and open up my layers, it's pretty tough to tell that I stretched anything there, which is exactly what we want. Now that might be more sky than we need, and maybe that won't always work. Sometimes we would have to employ a technique where, say, we grab the mountain or something like that. The other thing we're going to do is the same concept to the bottom. So you'll have to go back to make sure layer 1 is selected. If you try to do this on layer 2, I'm going to go ahead and turn these off so you can see what would happen. There's no bottom layer to duplicate, because this layer 2, was only that sky bit that we already did. So what I'm going to do is turn those back on, make sure layer 1 is selected, and I'm going to go from about here where I think I can get away with, I'm kind of eyeballing it here, and make my selection down to the very bottom, and then again, Command J, and it's going to make another layer that is just that section that we had selected. If I turn off all these other ones, you can see layer 3 is just that section. And then the same idea, with layer 3 selected, Command T, pull down, fill that white space, hit the checkbox, and give it a look, see if it looks natural. Now to me, that looks plenty natural. In fact, what I'm realizing is I can probably have afforded to stretch out the mountain even more. So it's not too late to do that. What I can do is I'm going to delete layer 2, where it was just sky. I'm going to go back to layer 1 with the rectangular marquee tool still selected. I'm going to come down and include more of this space. And I'm now going to hit Command J and Command T, and I'm going to stretch with this bigger selection and see how that looks. Now, I can't get away with quite filling the space this much, but I think I can get away with about that much. So check the box, and to me that still looks pretty natural. I don't think you would look at that and think, oh, that was definitely transformed or manipulated, which is what we want. Now I'm going to make a selection of just the sky like we did the first time. I'm going to hit Command J, Command T, and I'm going to stretch just this bit of sky to fill up the rest. And voila, we now have a 4 to 5 Instagram-worthy photo. The only thing we need to do is take it back into Lightroom, make any final changes, and export it. First thing we want to do that, right-click on any of the layers, the one that's selected usually is the best one, and go Flatten Image. What that does is it's going to shrink everything down to just one layer, save you some space. Go File, click Save. It's going to save this as a TIFF, and as soon as this bar is done, we can go back into Lightroom, and we'll see that the file has been saved and is ready for us to do something with in Lightroom. And back in Lightroom, you can see that this file, the TIFF version, has automatically appeared in our timeline, which means we could continue processing this, or if we were ready, we could go File, Export, and what I would always do is export this for Facebook, for LinkedIn, for Instagram, which I've already preset my export settings to match what I want on all of those platforms. I do a batch export, and I am done. I hope all of you were able to follow along. I know you're probably going kicking and screaming into this, but I hope you see the value in this technique and in converting your images. So I think that's it for me. There's going to be some links popping up around here, other videos, other workflows, things that might be helpful to you. I'm always open and always hoping for your comments. I'm going to be doing as many videos as I can in the next few weeks, and I want to know what you want to see. So with that, I'll see you on the next one.